source, loudspeaker, it gets more fatiguing for 2, and every added speaker, every added direct source you're putting in this room with reflections around it requests more out of your brain. Listening fatigue, anybody ever experienced listening fatigue where you're listening and after a half hour you're like, okay, I gotta stop? That ever happened?
The last 2 days.
Last 2 days. I know, but amen. So listening fatigue is real. There's a lot of reasons for it. Ideally, we all want systems that we can sit and listen to multiple albums, multiple recordings, and still enjoy it, right? In my experience, there's no thing that creates more listening fatigue than room reflections, because your brain's just kind of going like this, like, what's real? What should I be listening to? What should I pay attention to? So, the problem I have in convincing people to pay attention to acoustics is most people go, well, you know, you're saying all this stuff, but I can still hear the speakers. I hear them just fine. Therefore, it can't be so bad. It gets really bad if you have a room that's 1,000 square feet with 14-foot ceilings. Then you don't hear the speakers anymore. It sounds like a jumble. Who has a 1,000 square foot listening room with 14-foot ceilings? No one. But you have a potential client in Tahoe who is that. That's really bad. But in a regular, smaller room, you're still listening to reflections, and you don't know it. Because your 2 ears, working with your brain, are doing this active echo-canceling trick that's making you believe that there's no echoes in the room. So one way you can actually hear what's really going on into your ear canal before it's canceled by your brain is to shut down one ear. Now you're left with one source that your brain can't really do anything with. So please all try that. While I'm speaking, plug one ear, doesn't really matter, and listen to the sound of my voice, and tell me, do you hear more echo or more reverb in here than you did when you had both ears open? Unplug the other ear. Now do I sound more directional?
Yes.
Isn't that amazing? So, trick number 1 for free. This is free. Most of you have 2 ears and a finger. Walk into a room. If you want to hear how good or how bad the acoustics are, just do this and listen. As music's playing or somebody's talking, just do like this and pay attention. And you'll notice things that you didn't notice with binaural hearing. It's known as binaural hearing. So, works very well. If you don't want to use your finger, you can also put an earplug in there. It works just as well. But that's a good trick to hear what's really going on into your ear canal. So I like to think of reflections as potentially distortion. They're changing the sound. They're altering the sound from what was supposed to be heard, and we got to take control of it. So how audible are these reflections? I was going to show you this thing with the speaker. It's not working, sorry. Got to figure out what it was that happened to this phone. Maybe I'll try rebooting it one more time, and maybe that'll make it work. Restart. Okay. Give that a few seconds. But what you would have heard is what's called comb filters. They're easy to hear if you use pink noise or white. Typically anything that's wide spectrum, like a big orchestral piece that's essentially stimulating the entire range of frequency, you can actually hear these comb filters very well. They make everything sound kind of tunnely and weird and wrong. What happens in a comb filter is this effect. Just for this, I'm going to turn the lights off so you can see this a little bit better. Now we're getting scientific. Ready? Oh, she's yawning already. I haven't even gotten started. She's yawning. Okay, this is a loudspeaker seen from above. You seen from above, receiving hairline glasses. You like audio, and this is a wall on your right. There's some sound that goes from the speaker to your head. Some sound bounces off the right wall. That sound is going to take longer to get to you. Sound propagates at about a foot per millisecond. So if you have over here an extra 3 feet, it's going to take 3 milliseconds longer for the sound to get to you. And let's take a look at sound, at a sound wave, maybe a single tone, going doo, like a flute playing one frequency, after time T1. This is what's going into your ears and hitting your brain, direct sound. After time T2, this is what goes into your ears and hits your brain. Same sound, just delayed, offset by the difference in time. Now, as of T2, this and this look the same. So those two add together. So that reflection, instead of the sound getting lost and disappearing into the field outside, it's actually coming back and amplifying, which is good, right? We want more sound. But we got lucky here. This would be, if we had this going on all the time, this is a good reason to go buy a lottery ticket. But on a bad day, if you're listening to another frequency, which happens to be half that frequency in my little graphic over here, which would be, if you're playing a high C, this would be the next C down. Any musicians in the room who play an instrument? What would you play? Drums. I knew you were going to say that. So C, F, G, you don't know what that is. You do? Okay. Well, drums should be tuned to a certain pitch. But so if this was a high C, this would be the next C down, maybe a middle C. Another sine wave, it happens to be twice as long, half the frequency. After the transit time, we have the same sound. It's offset by the same amount, but look at this. When the pressure of the sound is going negative, it's going positive over here. And those two are going to work against each other, are going to cancel out the sound. So when there's a reflection off a wall, those bounced sounds at some frequencies amplify the sounds, and at other frequencies cancel it out. You actually completely lose the sound. So if you were actually to chart this over frequency, where this is sound level and this is frequency, at low frequency, the arrows are adding up because the waves are very long and the reflection is actually amplifying everything. And as of some frequency, this starts to go out of phase and cancel out. You get an actual cancellation of 20 or 30 decibels. This condition over here is this one, where the two sounds are half a wavelength away from each other and they're canceling each other out. And then you start going up in frequency, they don't cancel quite as well, and they start to add up again. This condition over here is this one, where they're a full wavelength apart, they're adding together. As you go up in frequency, they start to again go out of phase with each other, and you get another cancellation, another addition, cancellation, addition, cancellation. Half a wave, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. This is all sound that's gone away. So if a flautist was playing a pitch right there, it would sound attenuated. It would be like they just are blowing half or a third as loud as before. Is that good or bad? That's bad. We don't want that. We don't notice it at first until it's pointed out, or until I do my little demo here with a speaker. And in my demo, I go from reflection to no reflection by just moving the speaker away, and you can hear the difference. It's in the difference that you can actually tell. Now, the frequency of these dips and peaks depends on the relationship, the actual distance relationship between the speaker, the wall, and your head. You change that, and the pitches all change. So if you get closer to the wall, everything moves up. Further from the wall, everything moves down, up, down, up, down. Now, when you listen to music, you're not moving your head around, right? So, why am I saying this up-down business? I'm saying that because if you actually want to be able to hear if there are audible comb filters in your system, you can actually play pink noise out of the right speaker, and sitting over there, you can move your head back and forth. If you hear the pink noise changing, if it goes, there's an audible reflection there. And it's not because you're moving your head that the reflection is there or not there. It's always there. It's just moving your head gives you the ability to notice the difference. The same way as when you're setting the focus on a camera. You guys remember that cameras? You used to actually have to turn the stick to set the focus. Crazy shit. How do you set the focus? You try and error. You kind of go out and back in and back out until you like zero in on it. This is the same thing. You're actually listening to a change and paying attention to whether there is a change or not. If you actually are hearing this as you're moving your head back and forth, it's time to look at doing something. No light, less light, no light. So, reflections cause distortions. Sometimes those distortions are not detrimental. Actually, any guitarists in the room? There's a drummer. You play guitar? Any bass players? I play bass. We have a band. You're a bass player? Okay, let's start again. So guitarists know that in order to get good tone, you actually want a little bit of distortion. There are certain types of distortion that work better than others, and it's the same thing with listening rooms. There's a certain type of distortion from the room that is good. That's going to change the sound compared to headphones, absolutely, but that actually makes the sound more better. And there's other distortions that really mess it up, the same way as with the guitar. Odd harmonic distortions, slipping sounds bad, even harmonics sound good on the guitar. So, we have reflections, they introduce distortions. Some of the solutions involve absorption. An absorber is a material that's fibrous, typically fiberglass or rock wool, sometimes compressed cotton or foam, different materials. But it's something that actually provides friction to the airways, to the air molecules that are moving, and turns them into heat. Another solution is scattering, where rather than the sound bounce off the wall and come back to you, delay, create a comb filter, you break it up into small pieces. Those small pieces are down 10 decibels from where they were before, a third the level. The energy is actually preserved in the room, but it's broken up into a mist of sound, an ambient sound field that feels more open. So, our solutions to our distortion are some absorption and some scattering, also known as diffusion. How much and where? So, the next parts of my presentation are about how much and where. So first of all, in the business of how much, why don't we just cancel all the reflections? So, an absorber can be made by buying dense thermal insulation material. That's not that easy to find in this part of the world. 4-inch thick thermal absorption. Any of you guys lived in cold parts of this country, like Alaska, Canada? Where did you live? New England. What part of New England? Massachusetts. Not pretty cold. Not the coldest, but pretty cool. If you're in the building trade over there,
I live in the upper Midwest.
Upper Midwest, really cold.
Yes.
And you're here now, right? You got wise.
Oh yeah.
If you were in the building business over there, you can easily find dense compressed fiberglass that you put in walls because you need a lot of thermal insulation. Here, you got to go far to find dense compressed fiberglass. Only specialty suppliers have that, but you can go buy. Owens Corning makes it, called 703 or 705, but you don't just walk into Home Depot and buy 5 pound per cubic foot fiberglass. It doesn't exist here. You have to go to specialty suppliers. And usually you have to order it, and they ask you, what are you doing with this? Don't worry about it. So you go buy a bunch of that stuff, and you put it all the way around the room, because now you've gotten rid of the sound reflections, you just have the direct sound of your great speakers. You got great sound, right?
No.
No. Why not? There's no more, those distortions, those room reflections, all these comb filters, they're all gone. Shouldn't that be better? So everybody seems to know that that's not good, right? Has anybody ever done that?
I've heard it in an anechoic chamber.
Okay, so you've been to an anechoic chamber.
The sound gets dead.
Yeah, it sounds dead. It sounds wrong.
Yeah.
But somehow everybody in the audio business, whether it's dealers, installers, or end users, know that you don't want to do that. Yet some people still do it, but you know you don't want to do that. And to me, that's the equivalent of using aspirin. We all know that about 2 or 3 is what it takes to get rid of a headache or a backache, but we all know that you don't take the whole bottle, right? Now, how do we know that? Did we go to college and study aspirin 101 and said, okay, here's how you use it, 2, right? No. Somehow we know that. I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure out where that knowledge comes from, but the bottom line is we know we don't want to do that. Now, there's real good reason for not doing that. And the reason is, if you eliminate all the reflections, you're going to contradict the natural human knowledge that when you're in a space, you should be hearing some reflected sounds. And suddenly you're in here with no reflected sounds, and your brain's going, whoa, something's wrong. Something doesn't match. So you want to preserve some amount of reflection so as to not shock the ear-brain system that's been trained to hear reflections, but you want to do it just the right amount. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So if you were to put absorption everywhere around the room to where there's only direct sound, your ear brain does this. Exclamation point, question mark. Exclamation point, question mark. It's just like, whoa, this is wrong. Now, given about 2 or 3 months of listening that way, you will get used to it. And that's what recording engineers do often. They sit in these rooms that are completely dead, listening to directional speakers, and they mix albums on that. I don't know how they do it. I never got used to that when I was doing music, but that's what they got used to. It's just wrong. So, don't tweak your brain into trying to do this. Eliminating reflections is all bad. You just need to eliminate the right amount. So, those reflections will support the loudspeakers. The ones that support and enhance the loudspeakers are the ones we're looking for. Now, here's a recipe after 25 years of screwing around with this. Some of the screwing around was necessary, like that accidental date in Berlin in 1987 where I had to fix it, or else my job was on the line. And some of it has been just the luxury of being able to do research, go to conferences where people do nothing but talk about psychoacoustics all day long. Believe that? There's actually a convention, American convention of psychoacousticians. But after all of this, trial and error, reading many books, going lots of classes, studying a lot, I have found that if you cover 20% of the wall surfaces with absorptive material, and so these would be panels of dense fiberglass or dense rock wool. You guys ever heard of rock wool? You've probably heard of that.
Yeah, but
In California, it's really hard to find rock wool. It's sometimes known as safing material. They use it to make a wall's, I think it's like 4 or 5 hours safe to fire. It's a rock wool is made out of volcanic rock, basaltic rock that's spun into a cotton candy and then compressed down into a board. It's very absorptive. It's better than fiberglass. So look at a wall. Look at its total surface area, length multiplied by height. Take 20% of that, make it into boards that would be 2 foot by 4 foot wide, and distribute that evenly, and you've got yourself a good solution. In other words, we've preserved some reflections off the wall. We've only absorbed 20% of the wall, and we're going to absorb it evenly throughout the entire length of the wall. Don't cluster it all on one side, towards the front, or to the back, towards the top, towards the bottom. Just evenly distribute it on the wall, here, here, and here. That's going to lower your reflected energy by 20% only. That's all it takes. Any more than that, and your brain's going to go, something's not quite right here. And it's going to be hard for you to enjoy the music or the film. So, I could stop here and say, let's go and have a cocktail, but there's more. So, the more is that if you can also use some diffusive surfaces, so those scattering devices where the sound that hits them gets scattered into small pieces, redistributed in the room, adding 20% of diffusion interleaved with the absorption. So where you have a panel of absorption, some diffusion, some absorption, some diffusion, you will improve the room further, you will improve the spaciousness, and if you can mix and match what's called 2D diffusion and 3D diffusion in the room, even better. So in the recipe, if I can kind of go back to this, there are reflections in rooms. You don't always notice them because your 2 ears and your brain are canceling them out. You will really notice them if you do this trick. And to treat them, you want to cover about 20% of the wall surface with absorption and possibly 20% with diffusion. If you do that, you'd be amazed how much better the sound is. You'll double the sound quality in the room. If in the diffusion you can get to a next level of sophistication and actually use 2 different types of diffusers, where 2D diffusions towards the front of the room and 3Ds towards the back of the room, it's another step up. Now, what the hell is 2D diffusion? Watch out, we're going to the maroon slides. Science. This is a 2D diffuser. This is a 2D diffuser. The sound that hits a cylindrical device scatters back in a 2D plane. Okay, I call it 2D. One vector of sound hits it, it gets turned into a 2-dimensional hemi-disc. That's obvious, right? A cylindrical surface, you can see how it does that. Less obvious is a slotted diffuser, a thing that has vertical elements. When the sound hits that, it actually diffracts off the fins and diffracts only in a 2D plane. Sometimes known as a QRD diffuser. A company called RPG pioneered these about 30 years ago. Now there's many people making those. So these are 2D diffusers. 3D diffusers, we make a 2D diffuser made out of wood. It's totally beautiful, cylindrical. It's made out of solid wood. You would use it towards the front half of the room. And this particular device works between 400 hertz and 4,000 hertz, which is a core region where you want to do something. Sometimes diffusers are sold that are only 1 or 2 inches deep. They're sort of a waste of time because they only tackle the highest frequencies. And where you want to control this stuff is in the middle frequencies.
How deep are these?
So,
How deep is that model?
this particular thing is 6 inches deep. We also make 4-inch deep versions and 2-inch deep versions when you have to compromise for the sake of aesthetics and lifestyle. But really, with diffusers, you really want to start at 4 inches. Okay, 3D diffusers could look like this. A pyramid section, or this wacky-looking skyline thing. All of those devices scatter in 3 dimensions. They're a hemispherical re-radiator. So I like to put those towards the back of the room. The idea being that the front of the room, if there was a 2D diffuser over there past John's head, the sound that hits over there would get scattered horizontally and travel only this way in the room, from left to right. It basically would bounce back and forth, but in small pieces. A little non-correlated energy that's traveling this way. When you have non-correlated energy going this way, and it's hitting your two ears repeatedly with diffuseness, the brain interprets that as a wide open soundstage. That's what you hear when you go to a concert hall that has balconies and diffusive surfaces. The sound from the orchestra blooms out, bounces around like this, and you're like, it sounds open. Then, for the sound that passes your ear and goes towards the back of the room, in a concert hall, you usually get a return here. You know, the reflections from the back walls of a concert hall don't come from here, they come this way. And if you put 3D diffusion towards the back wall and the side walls towards the back up there, the sound that passes you gets up there, it's going to bloom and come back to you over here, it's going to open up further. So your sound stage will be precise because you've absorbed 20% of the energy, which is enough to get really much more palpable sound. And with the remaining energy, you're diffusing it horizontally here and scattering it hemispherically back there. You get this feeling of great sound stage and precision at the same time, which is what everybody's been fighting. You know, when you're playing with imaging, sometimes you can get to a point where it's really clear but there's no bloom, or you have a lot of bloom but the middle image is very vague. This is a way to get both. Okay? So these are some pictures of some of our 3D diffusers. Now in our acoustic recipe, right now I've been waving my hands at the walls, but the ceiling is also a reflector. And research has actually shown that the ceiling reflections are much more detrimental to sound quality than the wall reflections. There's a thing that happens in the ceiling when the sound bounces off there is it comes back and hits your two ears at the same time in a correlated way. And it's harder for your ear brain to interpret that as a reflection because it's hitting the two at the same time. You're like, I don't know, it's an equal reflection. I don't get it. Uncorrelated sounds are interpreted as reflections you should ignore. Correlated sounds that hit your two ears at the same time are usually interpreted as a desirable sound. But now you have a direct sound over here with a correlated reflected sound a bit later and your brain's going, I don't know what that is. So, ceiling reflections are a problem. They tend to narrow down the sound field because the two sounds hitting your two ears at the same time from up there are interpreted as mono sound, as central. Who wants to narrow their sound field here? Who's trying to do that? No one. So everybody's trying to open the sound field. Ceiling reflections are a big problem. So make sure to deal with the ceiling, and also make sure that your treatments cover the bass also. So a common thing I see people do is they put 1-inch sound absorbing panels on the walls only, and then they wonder why the sound hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten better because they haven't treated the ceiling, one, they haven't used diffusion, and there's no bass control. So 1-inch absorbers ignore, or bass sounds ignore 1-inch absorbers. And they do because wavelengths in the bass are 10 foot long. That's the actual sound radiated out. And when a 10-foot wavelength sees a 1-inch panel, it's like driving over a penny with your car. You didn't even know it was there. So you need thicker materials, or you need other topologies to control the bass, and I'm going to speak about that right now. All right. In my recipe, I've told you to use 20 and 20, and I'm going to tell you where to put them. So this is a room seen from above. This is the same room I've been using, showing all these different vectors of sound. And in this room seen from above, I'm going to suggest we put some sound absorbers on the ceiling at the midpoint, basically between speakers. It could be here, and your seating position. Right here, you want to put a bit of absorption so the sound that bounces up the ceiling is not returned. It's killed. On the ceiling, over or preferably behind your seating area, I like to put some 3D diffusers. So the sound that passes you, and otherwise would have bounced off the ceiling and then reflected off the back wall and come back behind you over here where your brain's kind of going, well, what the hell was that? I like to scatter that. So now instead of having this energy that hits you behind your head, you get this wash of sound from behind you. Then let's talk about the walls. So I'm going to first look at the left wall over here in this picture. This is you sitting in your chair, looking at your speakers or your screen, and this is what the left wall looks like. So on this wall, I'm going to suggest putting 3 absorber panels that if I actually took them off the wall and just put them on the corner here, you can see how few there are. 20% is this. What's my desirable recipe for absorbers? 20%. Everybody remember that, right? So 1 ear, you can hear stuff. 20%, it sounds better. So if you looked at this room, cut it into, that'd be 50%, cut it again into, that'd be 25%. This is only 3 panels. I'm putting them back up on the wall. Here's our 3 panels. We're interleaving them in the room with some diffusion. So these are 2D diffusers, and these are 3D diffusers. The sound from our speaker is going to go over here at that first reflection, get absorbed so it doesn't come back, and then over here and over here, it's going to get diffused by these devices. That's our left wall. Let's look at our right wall. Same thing over here. We're putting some absorbers on the walls that if I were to group them over here, it's still less than 25%, about 20%. Put them back up. We have some diffusers interleaved in them. And we have a sound field coming back off the wall that has a bit of reflection, a bit of absorption, and a fair amount of scattering. This is going to sound good. On the back wall, this is the wall behind us. We're going to absorb the middle part of the back wall so that the sound that passes our head does not come back from the middle of the back wall. If it did come back from the middle of the back wall, you would end up with sound traveling back and forth, which is correlated. And what does a correlated sound that hits our 2 ears over and over again do to the sound field?
It's confusing.
It's confusing it. Does it widen it or does it narrow it? So sound going this way that's continuously hitting the 2 ears at the same time is interpreted as correlated sound, which is, you guys remember that? When the 2 sounds hit the 2 ears at the same time, what do we interpret that as? Mono. Middle. Constrained, in the middle. So if there's a lot of sound traveling between the front and back wall, and the middle of the back wall is going to constrain the sound stage. We don't want that. So what I suggest doing is putting absorbers in the middle of the back wall, and then on the lateral side, some diffusers. So again, this is our back wall, the one behind us. These are back speakers if you have a 7-channel system. Absorbers, and then diffusers to the side. What the diffusers are doing is that the sound of the left speaker that passes you, that goes over there, what it does is it billows around that wall, hits the ceiling, bounces around, and comes back to you scattered, hitting from your side, hitting this side of your head. That sounds good. That sounds like being in a concert hall. The result of all this is a sound field that would look like this. So this is our direct sound. And these are our various reflected sounds. It'd be absorbed, scattered, absorbed, scattered, absorbed, scattered, scattered, there we go, scattered, scattered, scattered. And that's off the right side of the room. And then on the left side, we have more of the same.
Why are you doing it asymmetrically between the 2 walls?
There's always one guy who notices that. The room is laid out asymmetrically. That sounds like heresy, right? Who thinks that's a bad idea?
Asymmetrical is better. Well, you're talking about...
So we used to think that symmetrical was better, so that the whole right sound field of the wall should match the left sound field. Everything should be symmetrical, right? So that we want everything to work. We also used to think that the Earth was a giant disk, was flat, you go to the end of it and you fall off. And that finding is actually kind of cutting edge. Only recently has it been realized that by having a symmetrical sound field from the walls, you create a correlated reflection field to your head. What does a correlated reflection field to the head do? Narrows up the sound stage. And that was an accidental finding. I had an accident around that when a builder actually built a room, or an installer built a room asymmetrically. Just basically, it misinterpreted the plans and took the left wall for the right wall and put the panels one way on the right wall and then the other way on the other wall so they were asymmetrical. And I listened to the room, it sounded great, but I noticed, hey, you screwed up. Can you take these all back off and move them? They moved them and suddenly the sound field collapsed. What's up here? Put it back the other way around and it was good. Whenever there's an accident like that, what I do is I go do research. I go figure out what's going on here. I went to the UC Berkeley Library. I'm up from Northern California. I went to the UC Berkeley Library, looked around for any research on this stuff, and I found work done by a psychoacoustician at the University of Athens who, for some reason, had been studying the effects of correlated versus uncorrelated reflections in space. And he had found that if you have a slight difference in correlation between that wall and this wall's reflected field, it is easier for the brain to interpret those as reflections. It's easier for the brain to believe That's undesirable, and this is the real sound I'm supposed to be hearing. So the modern thinking in the last 5 to 6 years, since this research has been done, is that slight asymmetry in the wall structures contributes to a more believable sound field, primarily because it gives your brain the ability to believe more that that's an undesirable reflection set, that's an undesirable reflection set. So that's a very weird thing. Thanks for noticing it. And it does work. You're welcome to try it. If you guys actually start getting into acoustics, you can try putting panels symmetrically or asymmetrically, and you'll find it generally sounds a little bit better with an asymmetrical layout.